Hello friends, I'm LJ Jarvis, and welcome back to Louis Jarvis Show. Out of all the factions that's been relentlessly memed for its very existence would be the Tau of the Tau Empire, an alien species that believe that all must be united under their political philosophy that they call the Tau Va, or the greater good. Unlike other factions found within 40k, the Tau Empire are a more optimistic sort of race, who would try to use words first before going into war, unlike other factions who go straight to the point. Now some would say that it's because of this optimism. People would say that the Tau are a annoying faction. But the question is interesting. Given of how the Tau are, and given their presentation, do the Tau fit within the lore of Warhammer 40k? Now this isn't a video to poke holes within their lore. Rather, this is me analyzing the Tau, and to determine if they fit within a grimdark universe of Warhammer 40k. As some people would say that they don't. How they're a sort of prosthetic limb to the hand that is 40k. First things first, I think there has been a sort of misconception about the Tau. I think some people have had the misconception that the Tau were always made to be this all-good, all-white faction, within a saying in which there are no good guys. A saying in which everything is a shade of grey, though admittedly some factions are a shade darker than others. Even though I haven't read the first Tau codex, which came out during 40k's 3rd edition, I did read their second made codex, which was released during 4th edition. Now, before reading the codex, I had no experience with Warhammer 40k at all. I didn't even had any, idea on who the Tau were. Now, even back then, when I was reading this codex for the first time, I even thought that the Tau were very, very sketchy. They talked about themselves of being the good guys, and they talked themselves of this whole idea of the greater good for everyone, but of how they brought this greater good to the alien species that would join the alien empire is, again, sketchy. An example of this being the Vespids. Now, without this becoming a lore video, here's a quick little piece on how the Vespids have joined the empire. Multiple Vespid leaders were taken by the Tau, put translation devices over their heads so they could communicate with the Tau better because of the language barrier. Then they would return to their people and tell them about how great and wonderful the Tau Empire was and have them join them. I'm just saying, if you were to really think about that, it seems extremely sketchy. Or at least to me. Again, this is from the second made codex. But what about their first codex? Well, again, I've never read it. But I do know someone who did. One of my Twitter followers, he did tell me that he did have the first Tau codex. And after an exchange between DMs, he would tell me that the Tau always had this sort of Orwellian theme going with them. And each codex that would come afterwards would merely increase this Orwellian tone. From the first codex to the present, this is what he has to say about the Tau.
The Tau have a strong colonial theme going with them. When they land on a planet and there's an Imperial outpost, they go to it and demand they leave. If the Imperials don't, then there's violence. Personally, I think that while the Tau are not for everyone, they still fit into 40k. And although they do try to be the good guys of 40k, their flaws aren't that hard to miss. The Tau are enslaved, and the Firecast are like the clones from Star Wars. Surface level, they're not dark, but the more you look into it, the darker they become. Both are trained for no other purpose than war. The clones in Star Wars and the Fire Warriors only see retirement if they become unable to fight. If a Fire Warrior does not want to fight, then he has to climb the ranks until he is a general, serve 4 years as a general, then he may retire. Pathfinders are expected to die in the line of duty. If a Pathfinder squad has to choose between being wiped out in the hopes of victory, or living to fight another day, then they always choose to fight. And on top of that, every Tau is given a single purpose as though they are a machine. They're no different from guardsmen or factory workers, except their superiors care about them. In some of the modern lore, a lot of the Tau population, especially the humans, are drugged up. They're drugged up to remove depression and anxiety and to increase work effectiveness. If a man has something like a mental disability and he's suffering because of said mental disability, the Tau will just work him to death. They don't care about the suffering or feelings, they just want results.
So as you can see here, the Tau always had this sort of sinister side to them. Now even though the Imperium of Man is an in-your-face blade regime, the Tau Empire seems to be hiding their sinister aspect by wearing what is basically a theater mask. An empire that talks itself about being a force of good within a grim dark universe, but if you were to look at the fine print to their contract on joining their empire, it looks more like you're drinking the Kool-Aid out of one empire for another. Now even though the cup of the Imperium of Man is a decaying cup of wood, and the Tau Empire is a shiny wine glass, it doesn't matter. The contents inside both of them are still Kool-Aid. It's just one looks more advanced than the other. One has a better presentation. But again, Kool-Aid is Kool-Aid. Again, their talk of the greater good, of them merely wanting to help everyone within the galaxy to work together as one, at the end of the day, it's a theater mask. It's a mask that hides their sinister side to them. A mask that hides their lies. An empire of lies, you could say. Now, whilst you could say that the Tau merely existing because they are at the mercy of the Imperium of Man, a giant that can wipe them out from existence at any time it wanted, if it weren't for the fact that they were dealing with constant rebellions and constant threat from other outside forces. If this was the 30K Imperium of Man, the Tau would be gone from existence. But again, this would be if this was the 30K Imperium of Man, during the time of the Primarchs and the Emperor. But because this is the 40th millennium, because of the Imperium of Man, again, having to deal with other bigger threats, and they just don't see the Tau Empire as being that big of an issue for them, that's probably a grimdark reality for big-name Tau characters. That at the end of the day, they are at the mercy of a giant that can squish them anytime it wanted, if it had the time and resources to do so. Again, that's grimdark, and that idea fits very well with 40K. At the same time, I think there's another interesting side to the Tau. Another way of them contributing to the grimdark narrative that is 40K. And that is the idea that they see themselves as the good guys. That sees itself as doing nothing wrong ever if it meant it is for the greater good for everyone. All of their brainwashing, all of their propaganda, all their sketchy ways of bringing other alien species into their empire, all the atrocities that they could make, they still see themselves as being the force of good. A tyranny that can be exercised for the good or the greater good of its victims.
Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victim may be the most oppressive. It may be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated, but those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. They may be more likely to go to heaven, yet at the same time likelier to make a hell on earth. Their very kindness stings with intolerable insult. To be cured against one's will and cured of state which we may not regard as disease is to be put on a level of those who have not yet reached the age of reason, or those who never will. To be classed with infants, imbeciles, and domestic animals.
To finish this video off, I'll leave you with this thought on how exactly the Tau might bring an imperial world into their system. Now, despite how people might meme on the Tau being a communist society, if you were to really look into it, it doesn't really seem as such. Because, the idea of a caste system is a bit contradictory over the idea of Karl Marx and his idea of a classless society. Yet at the same time though, maybe I'm looking too deep into this, but I think it fits really nicely with how Yuri Bezmenov would describe as active measures. through generations of propaganda, through generations of honeyed words, and in some cases brainwashing, till eventually the people are willing to give themselves away to that of the Tau Empire. That through generations, the people will no longer see themselves as being the Grula, which in the Tau language means humans, when they will willingly accept themselves as being the Gruvesa, the human helpers, not being a Grula, the human, but a Gruvesa, the human helper, something that is outside of regular humanity, that they are the helpers of the Tau Empire, that they are the servants of the Tau Empire, that they are the domestic animals of the Tau Empire. That even though the people whom I have advocated since day one to have their world be part of the Tau Empire, thinking that they themselves will be rewarded, that they might have some kind of influence, well, that's not really going to happen. You're not going to get into power. You're not part of the caste system. You're not part of the ethereal caste. You're not even part of all the other castes of the Tau Empire. None of the other alien races are, so why would you? You're not part of the fire castes, the water, air, earth. You're not part of them. In a way, those minor castes are above you. You're below the caste system. You're the Gruvesa. You're the human helper.
You see, these useful idiots, the revolutionists who are idealistically believing in the beauty of the Tau Empire, when they are disillusioned, they become the worst enemies. That is why my water-cased instructors specifically made a point. Never bother with revolutionists. Forget about these political prostitutes. Your revolutionists in the Imperium, all these separatists, and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion, only to destabilize the planet. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they see that the ethereals have come to power, obviously, they get offended. They think they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot.
Now, even though there are critiques you can give to the Tau for both the lore and tabletop, I think the Tau have an interesting contribution to the grimdark universe of 40k. Because at the end of the day, 40k's grim darkness is not just the Imperium of Man. It's not a mono brush. Every single faction of 40k contributes to its grimdark narrative. The Imperium of Man being the Bloody Regime, the Eldari being the doomed species, the Tyranids being the inevitable end of all life within the galaxy, etc. The Tau, their contribution to the grimdark narrative, as stated before, all their talk of how all life within a galaxy must work together as one, is but a mask that hides the sinister aspect of the Empire. Which makes you question, is this for the greater good of all life? Or is this for the greater good of the ethereals, the top of the caste system? That the Tau are willing to commit atrocities, are willing to enslave entire species, till eventually the influence of the ethereals have reached from one end of the galaxy to the other, in which everyone will serve the greater good, willingly or not. I'm LJ Jarvis, and I'll see you all next week with a brand new video. Have a good one, guys. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to subscribe, then make sure to activate the bell notification button so you'll never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and I'll see you again soon. Have a good one.